city, like many Ukrainian cities, have an amazing ability to rebound. It was quite dramatic yesterday, I must say, the plume of smoke that I could see from my window here. But, you know, as soon as the air raid siren stopped, people went back onto the streets and tried to resume life as best they could. Power came back, water, and so on. But, you know, let there be no mistake. I think increasingly this is going to be the Russian kind of operational plan, is to use their long range but not very precise weapons and artillery to strike at Ukrainian cities. I'm afraid that they're going to be turning more to this brute force. They are faced, after all, with a resolute opponent, and that's basically how their playbook has operated in other conflicts as well. So we do have a lot to worry about, and the West should be arming Ukraine as much as they can in order to stop these weapons from raining down on Ukrainian cities.
Now, the world has been watching the continued shelling of the Azovstal steel plant. A new wave of civilians have been evacuated from there, but we're hearing a convoy of buses have attempted to evacuate more civilians from Mariupol. What's the latest there?
Well, the Ukrainian government is correctly, I think, portraying these as, you know, evacuation attempts, because we don't know whether they're successful until the evacuees actually reach government-controlled territory. But we're also hearing is that the evacuations are also happening through rebel-controlled territory, the Russian-backed rebels, and in these so-called filtration centers where people are interviewed, mistreated, and then sent to Russia. The numbers of people sent to Russia vary between 500,000, according to Mr. Zelensky, to up to 1 million, according to the Russians. So another worrying sign of how the Russians are treating civilians in this conflict.
Now, while all this is going on, the EU has unveiled its plan to ban Russian oil imports by the end of the year. Do you think that this is likely to happen? And if it does, what difference will it actually make?
Well, I hope so. I mean, because after all, Russia will be making more from oil exports this year than last year. But, you know, Manny, if there's one thing we learned from the COVID pandemic, is that there's very little unity within the European Union when it comes to life and death issues like, you know, COVID-19. So I'm not so sure we can expect total unanimity over this. It's symbolically very, very important, especially to the Ukrainians. That's what they've been calling for. But I think in many European countries that are still very reliant on fossil fuels, that it will take them much, much more time to adapt so they can say goodbye for good to Russian oil.
Now, the United States is warning Russia could formally declare war on Ukraine as early as next week on Monday, and it's also planning to annex the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. What would a declaration of war actually mean?
Well, I guess for one thing, it's, you know, it depends how you look at it. But from my point of view, this is a sign of desperation on behalf of Vladimir Putin, is that the war has not been going his way and that he needs more men, more troops to execute this war. But I think it also is going to show us that the Russians are going to attack Ukraine even further, like I was saying at the beginning, with this brute force. This can include, it's quite chilling, everything from carpet bombing of cities like Mariupol to forced evacuation of people to Russia, forced deportation rather. Also the use of those long-range missiles that we saw yesterday here in Lviv. Yes, the strike last week in Kiev with those missiles showed us how inaccurate they are. It hit an apartment building rather than the intended target. So again, my fears are very acute that the Russians will be using indiscriminate bombing to fight this war against the Ukrainians.
Michael, it was World Press Freedom Day yesterday, a good time to remember the 9 journalists that we know of who've been killed since the Russian invasion began. Yeah. Put that number into context for us. How dangerous has Ukraine become for the press?
Extremely dangerous. Reporting was already the most dangerous profession in the world, if you look at the numbers. And if this was 2021, Ukraine would be tied with Afghanistan for having the most number of journalist deaths of a single country. At the moment, the numbers range from about 9 or 10 so far to as many as 20 plus. But if you take the lower figure, it still would represent 20% of all journalists killed worldwide last year. So A lot of concern here among journalists that they are being deliberately targeted, which, by the way, is a war crime. So I think you're going to be seeing them taking even extra precautions to remain safe. But of course, eyes on the ground by the world media here is crucial for the world to know what's going on.
Michael Bociurkiw, these are dark times, but we're very grateful that you're still able to shed some light for us. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.